Hey, what's up, everybody? I'm here today with my WatchMojo colleague, Dave Strauss. It's the first time that I speak with one of my WatchMojo colleagues on the show, but Dave expressed interest. I'm very grateful for that, Dave. Welcome. How are you?
I'm doing great, Rob. How are you?
Doing well, too. I was really excited to talk to you, actually, because, in this kind of new work reality that we're experiencing, where we're all working from home and stuff, there's a bunch of colleagues that I've worked pretty closely with for a couple years now, yourself included, who I haven't had an opportunity to really get to know the same way that I would if we were working in an office. Like there's really no
Yeah.
water cooler talk or anything like that, outside of, brief small talk before our virtual meetings now and then. So yeah, I'm excited to speak to you and get to know you a little bit and talk about some cool stuff because I know that we're both interested in some similar topics. Um,
Yeah,
so yeah, why don't you take it away by introducing yourself and a little bit about your background for the audience?
sure. Well, let's see. How far back do you want me to go?
When you were
Let's say,
born, what day of
yeah,
the week was
sure.
it?
No, I think it was a Sunday, September 15th, 1985. So I'm an 80s baby. Um, I was adopted at 2 months old. So um, I don't know too much about my biological parents, but there's some interesting stories around that maybe we can get into a little bit later. Um, but yeah, I was adopted and to a wonderful, loving family of my mom and my dad, and let's see, Montreal, where I was born, lived here most of my life. Moved to Toronto at the age of 26 to pursue a career in advertising. So just kind of bounced around from agency to agency, um, and then eventually I moved on from Toronto and did some other things. I should mention that before the Toronto move ever happened, sort of one of my first jobs was actually here in Montreal. I skipped university. I went to high school, St. George's, went to Marianopolis for about a year, then Dawson for about a year, and then LaSalle College
Mhm.
to do media communications and advertising. It was a 1 year intensive program, which was great. It was all very hands-on experience. It was a pilot program that now I think they still run. So we were like the first group of students to do this like fast track marketing advertising course, which was covered everything: marketing, PR,
Mhm.
television, radio. And all of the teachers were like very hands-on people from the industry, advertising executives, PR executives. They ran their own agencies. So it was really a good, almost like just lightning speed education. And then what was great about it is after part of the program was to get an internship. So every student had to get an internship somewhere within marketing, advertising, whatever. And one of our teachers from our video production class happened to be the promo manager over at Global, which is
Global TV.
Montreal Global TV,
Mhm.
which was the Montreal office. And so I got about a 6 week internship there. Worked I think 3 weeks in the promo department, 3 weeks in the news department, and that was very interesting. Got to meet a lot of people, network with a lot of people. Actually, during my time, it was my first week in the news department. I was shadowing the news director at the time, and that was when the Dawson College shooting happened.
Oh, I remember that. I was in high school
Uh,
when that happened.
yeah, so it was sort of a big story in Montreal. I remember we were sitting in the lunchroom at the time, and we're just watching the news. So we were a bunch of news people sitting, in the newsroom watching TVA, which is
Mhm.
the French language, and they had this helicopter shot over Dawson College, and we read the headline, uh, "Shooting at Dawson College," and just as that happened, one of the I guess beat reporters ran into the room, opened the fridge, grabbed his lunch, and went out of there. And I guess we were like, "Hey, he figured it out. He's going down
He's
there, you
going on
know.
the scene.
He's going on the scene, and he spent the whole day there. And anyways, there's a very funny story actually about it. So, and not to make light of the situation, but um, they brought in the whole crisis team. You know, the team that they send from the national Ottawa headquarters, and at
Hmm.
that time it was Kevin Newman, who was the news anchor for the national
Yep.
news at Global, and they sent him in and a bunch of other people in. And again, at the time I was just an intern, and long story short, they invited me out to dinner, a very fancy restaurant where they had invited the entire, you know, emergency response team. You know, basically the team they send to Afghanistan, kind of thing, when stuff happens. You know, and I was sitting there, table with 20 people, and you're talking like cameramen who were like in the Iraq War, like
Hmm.
embedded journalists, and talking to Kevin Newman, and it was just such a great, interesting group of people to be around as such a young person, to get this experience and to be able to, like, you know, talk to Kevin Newman and ask him questions about his life, his career, you know.
Yeah.
um, and yeah, it was a very very interesting time. And then, you know, from there I actually got my first job through that internship, and through some other you know, friends in my class. I got a job working at my first advertising agency here in Montreal, and it was great. I was working with you know, clients like Rogers and Paramount and Pfizer, and Michelin was one of my biggest clients at the time. So it was a really good, like, training experience on media buying and how that whole, you know, advertising industry works. And then actually from there is where I transitioned to WatchMojo. So I think I had seen a news article in the Gazette, our local newspaper, about Ash and WatchMojo, and the company was still very young.
Hmm.
And if I recall, the way I got the job is there was no opening. I just emailed Ash straight up, and I was like, "Hey, I saw the article in the Gazette, and I got to say, I think, you know, I got some comments to make about your website. You know, not in so many words. I told them it was shit, and it could be improved. I was like, here's where you would improve it." And he's like, "All right, well, let's see if we can't find you a job and bring you in." And I think eventually I became the head of, like, advertising sales, and you know, helped the company grow in those early years. And then that's when I left. I think 2 or 3 years in, to go pursue my dream, working in advertising agencies in a big city, Toronto.
That's pretty similar to how I started at WatchMojo too. I was basically
Oh
like
yeah,
a Twitter DM to Ash, you know, asking if they needed any help from someone with my background and experience, and one thing led to another, and here I am. It's pretty cool. So you've been there for a
cool.
while then.
Well, yeah, I mean, I was there for, I think, 2.5, 3 years. Then I left for about 8 years. Um, then other stuff happened. I transitioned industries again
Okay.
from more of like advertising into actually the adult entertainment industry.
Right.
Um, so that was an interesting story. I was, you know, unemployed at the time, just, you know, again, bouncing from agency to agency, and like, all right, I got to switch it up. What do I want to do next? And I just applied for sort of another random, you know, marketing agency. Um, and I was doing the phone interview, and, you know, everything was going great. And you know, they said, you know, we'd really like to meet you in person, but, you know, before we continue this process, we should tell you that, you know, this is an adult entertainment company. You know, is that okay? I'm thinking like, you know,
Win.
yeah. I was like, yeah,
Jackpot.
that sounds great. Sure, you know, I'll give it a try. And yeah, I don't know. I guess I've always maybe had this. Um, I guess, desire to, like, explore working in the adult entertainment
Hmm.
industry. I don't want to say since I was young, you know, but, you know, we all get exposed to it at a certain point,
Hmm.
you know, in our lives. And I was like, I think running a porn site might actually be fun, you know, um,
It must have
and
been an interesting
interesting.
experience. I think a lot of people don't realize that Montreal is a huge like center for the industry.
It is. It's a rather large hub. You might not, you know, think about it or see it if you're here, but yeah, there's a huge, industry here in terms of the back end of the porn industry,
Hmm.
right? Not necessarily the front end. The front end is still LA and Vegas and um, those hubs for the production. But a lot of once everything's shot, a lot of it gets sent here to be edited, to be uploaded, to be moved around the internet and processed.
Yeah, it's fascinating. The company that I used to work for, the owners of that company were the ones who started Pornhub out of university. I guess they started it up as uh, fresh graduates, and then it just took off, and then they sold the company and basically have it made now, and they're still working in media. But yeah, I
Yeah,
was fascinated with that story, and I one of my close friends worked for that company for years. Um, and yeah, I mean, it wasn't that different from working in any other media company, except that you get, you
pretty much.
are exposed to that sort of content instead of the,
Yeah,
top 10 Marvel MCU videos that we work on typically.
exactly. It's all pretty much the same stuff. It's uploading content. Yeah, it's some of it's ad supported, some of it's fan supported. It's pretty much the same thing.
So from there, you came back to WatchMojo. How long ago?
Uh, I guess we're approaching three. I want to say 3 years now. March of 2020 is when I rejoined the company. So it
Okay.
was literally 2 weeks after the pandemic. I think I was in the office for 2 weeks, and then I was, everybody go home, and that was it. I've been home ever since.
Yeah, well, the timing lines up pretty much exactly with what happened to me. Because I was
Right.
between jobs. I was working in a job in a construction company, which I hated and didn't last there very long. But that's when I approached Ash more seriously about taking on a position, and then by the time we settled on like a start date and everything, that was the week of the shutdown. So I basically lost that opportunity. So
Right.
I had already given my 2 weeks notice at the other place, so I was without a job for a couple months. But I started freelancing, and that's how I got my foot in the door. And then by the summertime, they were able to offer me a full time position again. So it ended up working out.
Yeah. No, I can't tell you how many similar stories there are like that at Watch Mojo.
Yeah,
Great
and
it's a great company like that.
yeah, and like the fact that you can I mean, the fact that you left and were welcomed back is also pretty cool, because I feel like a lot of companies would maybe not hold a grudge, but be a little bit hesitant to accept somebody who had decided to leave in the past.
Yeah, for sure. No, they've sort of been great. Mojo very much is like a family. You're always sort of welcome. Yeah, there was never really hard feelings or ill will. Um, I think it was definitely it was a difficult decision for me, right? Because I did love working for WatchMojo. I did enjoy the company. It was a startup, so it was exciting. I enjoyed what I did, but I also had this dream to pursue a career in advertising,
Hmm.
and I really wanted to do that. And I think they sort of understood that can't really keep him from his dream. But at the same time, it's like I look at you look at your life path and the different forks and the decisions you make. If I hadn't done that, if I had stayed at WatchMojo, I wouldn't have gained all of the experience and career experience and varied experience that I was then able to bring back to the company
Yeah, of
10
course.
years later, right? So there was obviously a huge benefit to doing that, at least for myself and
Yeah, for sure.
for WatchMojo in the end.
What was it that brought you back in the end? Because you had been working in the at the porn company. So, like, what brought you back to Watch Mojo?
All right. Well, so let's sort of pick up where we left off career wise. So I moved to Toronto. I jumped from agency to agency and ended up at this porn company. It turned out to be a campsite. I'm not going to name the campsite, but so it was an aspect of the porn industry that was really starting to take off. In the past sort of, yeah, I would say 5 6 years, like camming really did transform from some sort of uh, misunderstood kind of secondary aspect of porn to really like this is now the one of the biggest money makers of the industry, right?
Hmm.
Millions and millions of performers and cam models worldwide. I mean, in every country, fans in every country, and they're like raking it in. So that was a very fascinating experience. And then from there, working at that company, I was doing basically media buying. So I would go out and make deals with other porn sites and companies that had traffic to send the traffic to our site, and it converts. People buy tokens to spend on the models, and that's sort of how everybody makes money. And so I was managing, I want to say it was like anywhere from $9 to $10 million budget a year, doing that. And one of the things about the industry that maybe a lot of people don't know is that we actually have trade shows and conventions, not just fan conventions like the AVNs and fan expo type of stuff, but actual executive conventions that people go to. And I noticed that a lot of my colleagues and people that I are in my similar role at other companies were going to these shows and making deals with people and networking. And I was like, hey, we gotta be doing this too. I'm missing out on the best deals. If I can negotiate us better rates for our media buys, this is how we do it. Send me to these shows. And so that's what they did. They started sending me to all these different shows. There was Phoenix Forum in Tempe, Arizona, XBiz in LA, and then AVN Internext in Las Vegas. Those were sort of the main ones, and there's maybe a couple here and there in Florida. But that's sort of where I really got to learn about the business and do exactly what I set out to do, which was meet people and negotiate better deals, for my company. And then there was one show in Miami called XBiz Miami, which was probably one of my favorite shows because it's very laid back, very performer focused, but there's no fans there, and it's at a beautiful hotel in South Beach.
Hmm.
And right, I think I had set everything up. This was going to be like the company's big, like flagship sponsorship, which something they'd never really done before was sponsor one of these shows. It was, in the tens of thousands of dollars that I had set up, merch, everything. Um, I'd put together all of the details, everything into place so that it would be perfect. In about 4 days, right after I think I sealed up the last box of merch, stuck on um, the shipping sticker, and gave it off to Purelator, they called me into the office like 3, 4 days before the show and fired me.
Oh my God.
I'm not going to go into the details of why. That's another podcast episode all in
Okay.
itself. But so they fired me, and I was pretty upset. I mean, I really enjoyed that job. I enjoyed the company I was working for, and I didn't even see it coming. Like, it totally blindsided me
Mm.
because I literally, they had my hotel booked, my plane ticket booked, everything was already organized for me to be at this show 4 days later. And I was distraught and talking to some of my friends in the industry, and they were all like, Dave, like, you should just come anyways. Like, if you need to find another job, just come to the show. We'll find you one. So like, my friends in the industry had my back, which was like
It's
great.
pretty cool.
And so you know what I did? I said, fuck it. I called up the hotel and I was like, do you still have my reservation? They're like, yeah, we got your reservation. I was like, okay, put it under my credit card instead of the company's. Done. So had my hotel. Called up the airline and I was like, hey, do I still have my ticket reservation? Yes. Already paid for? Yes. All right. I'm taking it, you know? So, because they would have lost all the money
Yeah.
for the ticket, or if it was them, they didn't cancel the ticket. Maybe they could have, but they didn't.
Hmm.
I got to the airport, got on the plane, went anyways, and you should have seen the face of my boss when he saw me standing there, with a glass of champagne in my hand. That was maybe the sweetest moment of my life, watching the look on it. What are you doing here? And there I was. Um, so yeah, from there, this is a very pivotal part of my career. From that show, I had the support of the community. I was the whole show. I was networking with people. Who can I work for? What can I do? Maybe I can freelance, do some marketing consulting. And by the end of the show, I was ready to start my own advertising agency that specializes in adult entertainment.
Oh,
Because
cool.
what I noticed at that show was that there really isn't a full service agency that serves this community. It's not like, um, a brand like Brazzers can walk up to Wyden Kennedy in Portland or Ogilvy in New York City and say, "Hey, we want a campaign." Um, Pornhub recently, or in the past few years, when they were really at the top of their PR game, could, and that's what they were doing. They were able to use. They had the kind of PR and brand credibility that they could go to a legitimate mainstream agency and get campaigns and ideas and stuff like that and marketing support. But sort of before then, there's nothing serving any of the other brands, right?
Hmm.
No other agency would touch them. So I was like, okay, there's a market opportunity here. There's a need, and there are people who do copywriting or PR, or offer marketing services, web design or graphic design, but everything's siloed. So they're all individual businesses. So if you want to sort of run a marketing department, you've got to hire all of these people, manage all these people, do a combination of freelancers and internal people, and it becomes very cumbersome to manage all those things. So what I did is I decided I'm going to offer all of these services sort of under one roof, and I partnered with a couple of people and who already they were running a successful advertising agency in Toronto, and so that's sort of what we did. Was we started an agency. I think my first client was we had Naughty America. From that show, I walked away with Naughty America and a lead with Hustler Hollywood, which is the Hustler sex toy store uh, chain, and sort of the rest is history there. In terms of, we ran it, I want to say, successfully for the first year. Everything was doing really well. We were making good money and moving up to the point where we broke ground on a brand new office that we were building to house all of our employees. And then things kind of hit the fan where at one point, because we had three partners, myself, um, and two other guys. I was responsible for doing the sales, so I was doing tons of traveling, going to shows, meeting people, doing sales, signing up new clients. The other partner, once everything was signed, he would do the project management and actually plan the campaigns and do the day to day of the
Hmm.
client management. And then the third partner was all about finances, accounting, making sure money was collected from clients, rent was getting paid, and and employees were getting paid. And so what ended up happening was I decided at some point, and this is my own fault, and this is sort of a lesson that I've learned from this experience. I wasn't watching the books. I wasn't watching the numbers. I wasn't looking at any of the accounting month to month. I figured, hey, he's got it under control. He's responsible for it. Um, but one day I asked to look at the books. I wanted to see the numbers. I wanted to see
Hmm.
how the business was doing, and they couldn't produce them. Didn't have any. He wasn't keeping track of fucking anything.
Oh my God.
And so I did my own investigation. I said, okay, well, we got to have something. So I asked for all the numbers and started to investigate. And um, we were sharing the rent for the building with another company, and we were sort of splitting it three ways. And we had all agreed initially to split it in a certain percentage based on the amount of office space that was being used by each company. And what I noticed is that our agency, our company, was overpaying by about, I want to say, 20% of certain expenses that were shared. We
Hmm.
were overpaying, and I caught them, and it didn't end well, and I threatened them to give me back the shares and then shut down the business and restarted it. And anyways, it was a bit of a clusterfuck, but it did teach me a lot about running my first business and entrepreneurship and sort of what the mistakes that I made and things that I wouldn't do in the future, right? So that was sort of the end of that saga. And sort of while that was happening, because I was traveling so much and going to different shows in AVN um, and Vegas, I was meeting a lot of people, and I met a woman, and we started to date. She was American, I'm Canadian, so we would do um, the long distance relationship thing. She would come visit me, I would go visit her, and then eventually, we decided we wanted to take the relationship to the next level. So I ended up moving to Las Vegas, and we got married, and we were living there, North Las Vegas, which is I love it out there. I don't know if you've ever been to Las
No, not
Vegas.
yet. Hear great things about it all the time.
Before before you die, visit it once, because
Hmm.
it's
I'm
you'll
not
get
much of a
addicted.
gambler, but I think just the atmosphere is enough to, for me to enjoy being around.
It's got a vibe that you can't really get anywhere else. I mean, just I say this to everyone. It's like the view from the Walmart parking lot is spectacular,
Hmm.
you know. Whereas here, it's just it's not spectacular at all. It's just a Walmart parking lot. But like you're surrounded by mountains, and it's just gorgeous. Yeah, so we lived in Las Vegas for a while, and then again, more things more things happened. Shit hit the fan. We screwed up our immigration somehow. We hired a lawyer. The lawyer gave us bad advice, and we ended up getting married in Las Vegas, and then traveling to Canada, to Montreal, during, I think it was the summer of, I want to say, 2019. And what I didn't realize is, once you get married in America, technically you're really not supposed to. If you're going to get married, you're not supposed to do it like that. I'm supposed to be in Canada. She's supposed to be in the U.S. We're supposed to, do the immigration from our home countries, right?
Hmm.
But there is a sort of law where it's like you didn't know you were going to get married. It was just like a spontaneous thing,
Well, that's
right?
what Vegas is known for, right?
Well, and that's kind of what happened. I mean, we didn't really realize that we were going to get married. I mean, we knew it was going to get serious, but ultimately, I was living in America, and I was like, you know what, I really want to marry this girl, because otherwise I was just going to stay there for the 6 month visa and go home, and still
Carry
keep
on the
figuring
way.
it out.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. But we had to make a decision, like, what were we going to do? So that's what we ended up doing. But yeah, on that Montreal trip, when we ended up coming back, I think on the July 1st or July 4th or something like that, we got stopped at the border, and they were like, are you guys, what's your relationship? And I was like, yeah, we're married. They're like, oh, secondary, right? And they kept us there for probably, I want to say, 6 hours. And it was stupid, because from the first minute they knew they weren't going to let me back in. So I
Hmm.
don't know why they bothered to do all this stuff. But yeah, they didn't let me back in, and I wasn't let back in until we until we ended up the relationship ended up deteriorating. We got divorced, and then my status changed back from um, a green card seeker back to a tourist, right?
Okay.
And I had to wait about 12 months, because then we were separated for about a year. Then COVID hit, so the borders were shut down anyways. Like, I couldn't go visit her, she couldn't visit me. And then, yeah, the relationship just sort of deteriorated. But the whole time we were going through the immigration process with the hopes that I would eventually be able to go back home and get a green card, and live happily ever after in America with my family. But then she cheated on me, and
Oh,
yeah,
sorry to hear
ended
that,
up
man.
ended up cheated on me, ended up getting pregnant, and saying, hey, you know what, I'm keeping it, and gonna stay with this guy instead.
Oh, holy shit. That is rough.
Yeah, so that's sort of what was happening during my COVID pandemic time. And then yeah, we just ended up getting divorced. And look, at the end of the day, we're still friends, we still talk, and everything is good. Uh, but yeah, it was definitely a bit of a rough patch, and it took quite a bit of time before I was able to get all the immigration stuff sorted out, and then able to get back into America. But I still can't get back into America because I'm not vaccinated.
Oh, I feel you. I feel your pain. I have not even attempted to
Oh,
leave the country, to be honest with you. It's not
no.
something that interests me yet. Um, I feel like there's still
Yeah.
too many complications to deal with. So
Oh, yeah. Traveling is such a nightmare, anyways. Even if they did let me back into the country, I wouldn't want to do it.
yeah, that's it.
Yeah.
That's been one of the That's been one of the big things over the past couple years. Uh, well, I don't know. I don't know how deep you want to get into that, the vaccination topic, because to be
However deep
honest,
you want, man.
well, I am frankly sick and tired of talking about it
Sure.
at this point.
Good.
Um, you know,
Well, see, I would prefer to live in a world where it's not even a topic anymore, right? Like,
yeah,
are you vaccinated? Are you not vaccinated? Like, asking people or not asking people. Don't ask. Don't ask. Don't tell. How about that?
that's my philosophy, to be
You know?
honest. A lot of people
Yeah.
like to wear it on their sleeves, but
Mm,
you know, and in both camps, right? You know,
sure.
you have like
Sure.
the outspoken people on both sides of the fence, and
Totally.
you know, as with most things, I think a lot of the truth lies more in the middle, and
Always.
that's where I like to reside. You know,
Yeah.
I'm not an extremist in any direction.
Exactly. Same here, man. I'm weirdly in the center, or like, or I or all like the whole idea of the left right spectrum, for example. It's like, how can you be on both sides? How can I be for the Second Amendment and, abortion rights?
Well, there's such a
Like,
thing as a nuanced opinion. You know,
yeah.
it's like
Oh, yeah. Exactly.
I don't know, for so many people, it's either it's black and white thinking. You know, it's
Hmm.
and with these, you know, also with the party systems that we have, like both in Canada and the US, obviously more in the US.
Yeah.
You know, the blues and the reds, it's kind of just ideologies that people follow
Yeah.
without, you know, you have to subscribe to the whole package, right? Otherwise it doesn't work for many people.
Well, exactly. No, that's the problem. But I I still would prefer to have a two-party system than what we have here in Canada, because then you just split the vote and it just goes the wrong way every
I don't
time.
even know what we have here in Canada. I'm probably better educated on American politics than Canadian politics, sadly,
Yeah. Right.
as absurd as that is. But
Yeah.
yeah. Anyway, the this is actually not the first time that we've been on a podcast together.
True.
So we did a pilot
We
episode
did.
for our WatchMojo podcast that never really got off the ground, but it was still fun. It
It
was a good
was, yeah.
time when we did it. Um,
Yeah.
and it was for the Unveiled channel, I believe.
Right. We were gonna do an unveiled podcast, that's right, but it
We're
ended
gonna
up
do
being
an
like way too much work than I thought it would be. So I
Yeah,
killed
for
that
sure.
idea.
And I don't know where WatchMojo stands on some of their podcast projects that they had going on, but
Right.
that was a fun one because it was mostly centered around aliens, UFOs,
Right.
kind of like outer space mystery topics and stuff like that,
Yes.
which you and I kind of connected on because we both have some interest in those realms.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So let's talk about that a little bit, I guess.
Sure.
I'm always
Well,
looking for people to talk to have a good alien talk with. So
great. Well, you're talking to somebody who lived 50 miles away from Area 51 for almost a year.
well, did you visit? Did you like do a drive by or anything? Like check out the
So
complex?
not exactly, because you can't exactly do a drive-by. There's really only one place to do a drive-by, which is the sort of Rachel, Nevada entrance, the famous
Hmm.
one that everybody sort of knows about. You know, the famous gate with all the warnings and the camo guys that surveil that area. Um, but what people don't know is on the other side of the mountain range is the highway that goes north out of Las Vegas up to Reno. And my ex-wife's family lived in Reno, so we did that drive um, at least like once a month, or something close to it. We were doing that drive constantly, and it's about 9 hours. But yeah, we would drive by all the time, and I would always hope to see something,
Yeah.
and most of the time anything you see in the sky around there are like drones, like
Hmm.
predator drones and that type of stuff, because Creech Air Force Base is right around there, and that's where they do like the drone programs where they'll actually like fly all the way out to the Middle East, like from there, refuel halfway. So if you see like green lights in the sky, that's probably what it is.
Yeah.
Um, so I never actually saw anything, but there is something interesting when you do drive by. I want to say it's near Mercury. Uh, Mercury. If you look on a map, it's probably near Mercury, but it's not on a map. You can't find it on Google Earth. You can't find it on Google Maps. I've driven by this thing many times and was never able to find it on an actual map. And it's basically just it's a long dirt road, and halfway to the mountains and like to the highway on this dirt road is like a guard tower, a very secure guard tower. There
Mhm.
isn't like no fences, no nothing, just very like if you drove past it and you weren't looking for it, you wouldn't even see it. You know what I mean? But that is what they call the Mustang Gate, and that's the back entrance to Area 51,
Okay.
where and I challenge you to find any information anywhere about so-called Mustang Gate. But from people who I know who work there, I'm not going to name names, but I've met them at times. That was the entrance that they took to get into Area 51. They took them from Las Vegas and up the highway to that particular entrance that just winds through the mountains, and then you end up at the facility.
Interesting. I have never heard of that before. That's news to me.
Yeah. Well, there's probably, that they don't want everyone to know about that stuff, right?
For sure.
There's still a certain level of secrecy.
I'm sure you're familiar with the story of Bob Lazar
Mm-hmm.
and his
Yeah.
experience working well, what was the name of the base that he worked at? It was S4.
I think he called it S4. Yeah.
Yeah. So I basically listened to, he was on Joe Rogan's podcast, which I listened to. There was a
Yeah.
documentary that came, I think it was Jeremy Corbell who released a documentary
Yeah.
about Bob Lazar a couple
Mm-hmm.
years ago. And he wrote a book, which I read also.
Yeah.
And as far as I can tell, like, I mean, obviously there's no way to know for sure, but I did not detect any bullshit coming from him. At
Yeah.
least, whether or not he's I believe that he's telling the truth in terms of what he believes he saw. Let's put it
Yeah.
that way.
Sure.
So,
Sure.
what the obviously a lot of it is like, the compartmentalized nature of the work that he was doing, where he was isolated and alone working on
Sure.
certain components, but that had these properties that he'd never witnessed before, the anti-gravity stuff.
Sure.
Incredible. And then the big one is when he claims to have seen an operational flying saucer
Right.
that was
Right.
hovering in midair, and then he got to go inside and there was no controls, and it was like telepathically, basically operated
Right.
and
Right.
stuff like that. So to me, like, if he's making that up, I really don't see any reason for him to make that up. And I don't think he's really cashing in too much on this. He's been under a lot of public scrutiny. His
Yeah.
career is basically over. Uh,
Yeah. Sure.
so it's a really fascinating story. And I mean, I follow a lot of Jeremy Corbell's other work too, and he's a pretty serious
Mm-hmm.
researcher. He's very invested in the alien and UFO phenomenon.
Yeah.
And we're seeing so much of it out in the mainstream news now compared to, years ago.
All right. Well, that's okay. That's where I'm going to start calling bullshit. Now,
Mm.
I'll sort of agree with you, or sort of lay out my beliefs. I guess is that I do believe that we're not alone in the universe. Um, whether or not aliens have been to planet Earth or even here now, I don't know. I've never seen one. Whether or not the government has alien technology and advanced technology, again, I don't know. I've never seen one. That's not to say I haven't seen some weird ass shit, which again is maybe another story.
Okay, well, put a footnote on that because I definitely want to revisit that, but continue.
Sure. But I'll tell you, when it comes to this Bob Lazar story, you see a lot of the same characters. You see Bob Lazar, you see the guy who broke his story from the Nevada, that local
George
Nevada
Knapp.
news. Yeah, George Knapp, those guys are always around. And I just look, when it comes to the mainstream media, it's like, we know they lie to us. That's
Yeah.
sort of a given. Like, propaganda is a big thing for them,
Yeah.
and they're sort of always lying to us. So to me, who has never trust the media about anything, suddenly I'm going to trust them now that they're revealing the truth of UFOs or showing me videos of UFOs. This is where my bullshit detector starts to go off a little bit, because it's like, well, these are the people I'm not supposed to trust because they lie about so many things. But like, now I'm supposed to believe them about this. I don't know.
Right. The
You know.
skepticism is
Um,
justified. I'm with you on that.
yeah.
I just wonder if, it's part of some sort of agenda,
Yes.
for lack of a better term, to
Some
disclose
declassification or disclosure.
for whatever
Yeah.
reason. And it may be a globalist thing, like that may help advance
Yes.
some.
Like blue beam or whatever.
Yeah,
Yes.
exactly.
Sure. I definitely tend to agree with you on that. Um, but again, then again, if they're doing it, and even let's say it is real footage of a real craft, I think they obviously definitely have some sort of agenda behind it. But I'm
Mhm.
not ready to jump on the bandwagon that this is real footage of real alien aircraft, or real alien aircraft, or some sort of AUV, and the media has this footage, the Navy has this footage. Again, not saying that maybe pilots haven't seen things in the past or stuff hasn't happened in the past, but I'm not convinced on these videos from these sources.
Right. But I think, well, there's so many interesting questions to go off of here, because
Yeah.
either, okay, so if they are legitimate, unidentified, like, could be extraterrestrial craft, that's obviously a huge thing that is, everybody's curious to know what's going on, who are they, what are they doing here, what do they want. So that's number
And
one.
and yeah, okay.
Number two, if it is all fake, or if it's government, government stuff that is being, released, to fool us or whatever, or convince us that there's a threat, there's danger, aliens are here, run for cover, or give us more power because we'll protect you from these nefarious alien forces, whatever that may be. You'd want to know what that plan is coming from the media and the government too, right? And then number three is, regardless of both of those, whichever the first two options are, if these things are operational and perform with the characteristics that they're claiming they do, like being able to accelerate to crazy speeds and defy gravity and stuff like that, whether it's man-made or extraterrestrial, like, if that technology exists, then that is world changing in and of itself,
Sure.
right?
Yeah.
Because there would be so many other applications for that. And there's, like, I could go into the number of, like, people in the science world, like, who are labeled as pseudoscientists, who are
Sure.
working on theories about these things, like, um quantum unification theory and stuff like that proposes that all of this is actually possible, and that you don't need advanced tech for it, like the free energy stuff and everything. um it opens up so many questions.
Yeah, I forget who it was, but there's I think his name was Hamilton. He was like an Ontario, like, garage scientist, doing just experiments in his garage. And I think you can even see his videos on YouTube. I think his name was Hamilton. I could be wrong. Um, but he was doing like anti-gravity experiments, or he was just like using frequencies to make like metal objects float in space. And again, you can go see these, um, and when we talk about science, I think like it's about recreating uh, experiments, and like I think other people have been able to recreate his experiments under similar conditions, and even being able to like make objects, like metal and non-metallic objects, like fuse together using frequencies.
Hmm.
And like that, it makes sense to me. It's like, sure, of course frequencies can affect metals and non-metals and do that kind of stuff. So if that stuff is possible, I'm sure other things are possible. But just back to the like the CNN footage and stuff. Another thing that makes me skeptical is, like, we've got really advanced cameras that we've launched into space that can see stars from billions of light years away. And this is some grainy footage on a like aircraft carrier, on a fighter jet. Like, you mean to tell me you can't get better footage of these things? I don't
Yes,
know.
it's a good question. Um, I don't know. I don't know where I
Like
stand on
that's
that
maybe the
because
one. Like that's maybe the one of the things as well about sort of a lot of these. Just because I like to play devil's advocate
yeah.
and be a skeptic sometimes. Like, how come we haven't seen an incredibly good quality piece of footage of a UFO that hasn't been debunked as CGI,
Hmm.
right? Because I haven't encountered one yet, right? I'm sure there's ones that are convincing that haven't really been debunked, but like we don't know, man. With deep fakes and CGI, like I'm sure they can sort of make anything look real that isn't.
It's only getting more complicated and harder to discern what's real and what's fake because the
Right.
deep fakes are getting very advanced and very good to the point where they can mimic people's voices, faces, stuff like that. So it'd be super
Yeah.
easy to create a UFO, a believable UFO video.
I can right now. I have this AI photo app on my phone, and I just typed in fighter jets chasing UFOs in Nevada, and it just spit out an image that, again, grainy but passable,
Yeah.
right? Um, so if we're at that advanced technology where we can make a photo, it's like, well, we can make video easily.
Yeah. I think with the military cameras and stuff though, like their goal probably isn't to get like HD quality photos of stuff, but rather like the raw
Yeah,
metrics of the things that they're
sure.
looking at, which is I think more the case with the CNN footage that was released. But
Yeah,
at the same time, yeah,
like it's
you bring up
spontaneous. They're just getting it. They're capturing it. It's not like they're actively going out to try to find it with the best equipment they got.
what's
Yeah,
more interesting to me is the first hand accounts from the pilots that like there's been already a couple on Rogan's podcast. I mean, he's the one who's bringing all these people out into the spotlight, who've
sure.
reported for years seeing them regularly and not knowing what they are, you know, and just being constantly exposed to them, and nobody even suggesting, yeah, try to take photos or videos of them or whatever, because it's just something that's not of concern. It's like, yeah, it's happening out there. Like, we don't need to bother with it.
Right.
So strange.
Yeah. I'll tell you. I'll tell you something interesting about Area 51 and maybe even sort of military in general. Um, like all the hangars at Area 51, and all like the supposed secret deep underground military bases, right? Um, I guess it's probably like maybe popular culture or movies or whatever, um, like has us all believing that this is military, right? It's
Mm-hmm.
U.S. Department of Defense, but actually, it's mostly private contractors that are working out of these facilities, or who built these facilities, who put the money into these facilities. Like these are private companies. So if alien technology exists, um, then I would say it's probably in the hands of the private sector and not necessarily in the hands of the military. Maybe they're working hand in hand, but I would say that's where like all of the research and funding um, is being like allocated. It's coming from the private sector, and these are like from my own, I guess, sort of insiders.
That's,
Who
well, I mean, that's interesting, and because you hear so much too about the military industrial complex and how much sway and power they have with government.
yeah,
So it would make total sense that they have some part to play in this and that they're probably instrumental in it.
yeah, like at Area 51, right? Like you've got all those hangars, and they're each about a mile apart, so that like each project doesn't know what the other hangar is like working on. And it's like Lockheed has a hangar, Boeing has a hangar, Raytheon has a hangar, and they're all working on their projects.
Hmm.
But it's not like it's all private contractors. It's not military. It's not guys in camouflage uniforms.
You mentioned that you mentioned Hollywood's influence on public perception of
Mm.
Area 51. I think that that Hollywood's influence has basically shaped people's perspective on the entire, like, prospect of alien life in general, because,
Yeah,
how many alien movies have we seen come out in our lifetime? Like, thousands.
lots. Yeah,
It's crazy. It's become its own, like, genre within Hollywood, and, I wonder if there's a reason for that, you know?
well, if we recall, what was it, that movie, The Hurt Locker, about it was the Iraq War, um, following 9/11.
Mhm.
There was, for years, there was speculation that the Department of Defense was involved somehow in the making of that film. I think it came out years later that they were heavily involved in the writing of the script, and had people on the ground, and made sure that the film was portraying the military and the war in Iraq a certain way, right? So it's not crazy to believe that the Department of Defense, or private enterprise, would also have some sort of influence over uh, the Hollywood narrative. Right?
Yeah, it makes total sense. I have a fascination with Hollywood movies and, the messaging that goes into them. It's so complex, but it's so interesting to kind of study. And, I think most people's whoever is interested in this topic, I think the go-to, to start with is The Matrix, right?
Sure.
It's,
Yeah.
it's such a it's such a cool allegory for just, being asleep and just, believing
Yeah.
everything that you're told, and, it's so complex too, with the many cons that come with being awake and aware of everything that's going on around you, and how it can destroy your life. And then, you have that character who wants to go back into the Matrix. He wants to eat his
Yeah.
fake steak and not know, and ignorance is bliss.
Yeah.
And, I feel like there's a lot of people out there too. It's like, don't talk to me about,
Yeah.
these theories and everything. Just leave me alone. Let me do my
That
thing.
I had an encounter. I won't be specific, but I was at a house party probably 10 years ago, and I talked to a friend of mine who was a paramedic at the time, because the conspiracy theory involved paramedics, and I was like, can I ask you your professional, experience on this situation? He's like, nope, I don't want to hear about it. Like, don't talk to me about that shit. I don't want to know. I was like, okay,
Yeah. I
yeah,
mean, a lot of people just don't want their world to be
that's right.
shaken up.
Yeah,
But yeah, I think
exactly.
that like it's probably a lot of people have probably been shaken out of their slumber, and a lot of people, they're just so um rigidly invested in the way that they believe the world is, that they nothing could really change their perspective. And the past two
There's
years with, like you mentioned, just propaganda. And I'll not to go back into this topic, like, I don't know, it's no
yeah,
nobody really wants to hear about this anymore, but like,
yeah,
with the vaccines, and like the intense propaganda coming from every which way about how they will save people's lives, and they're so effective and everything. And it really only came from the mainstream media and the government, which is basically the mainstream media is like the spokesperson for the government. And in Canada, the big media companies are all government funded, so it's no mystery why they champion the vaccine so much. Um, but now, it's obvious that that was a total lie. Like, it was not what we were given, was not what we were sold. So,
yeah.
I
Well, yeah, well, I was just gonna say. I mean, everybody wakes up at their own time, their own pace, and I think that's, people like us, who may be a little ahead of the curve, have to be patient, and just kind of keep doing our thing, and people will wake up eventually. They all have different thresholds of what is like acceptable, with regards to, I guess, their belief system, or worldview, and the things that start to penetrate that and break through the matrix. Um, yeah, everybody has their own pace. Like, I was at this brunch with my family, and I'd say before the pandemic 3 years ago, maybe everybody leaned a little bit on the woke side,
Hmm.
of things, and it was obvious, and it was difficult to bring up subjects like the vaccine and propaganda and the media and this, they didn't want to hear it. Now, 4 years later, I don't even have to sit there and say anything. I could just watch as they, discuss the issues of the day, trans rights and what's going on in some of the schools,
Hmm.
and what's going on in America, and and the fact that it's wokeness in general is being rejected at such a level that even the baby boomer generation is starting to come around and reject that stuff, and thankfully the younger generation who they're seeing it in their universities and in their schools, the smart ones are rejecting it, and so I do have hope and faith.
Yeah, it feels like it's an uncomfortable period that we're going through right now, but it does feel like it's merely a phase and that we'll come out the other side of it. At
We
least
don't
to
have a
me, it does.
choice. We don't have a choice, and this is maybe where we can get into some of the like esoteric astrology stuff. Like,
Yeah.
and I was listening to your last episode about, and there's the part about how um, we're constantly moving, right?
Hmm.
And if you're not moving, you're staying still or you're going backwards, right?
Right. Well,
Um,
yeah, if you're not moving, then
yeah,
you're falling behind because
right.
the rest of the universe is moving.
Exactly. And we're not just moving forward, we're also ascending, right?
Hmm.
Like, and I feel like the whole point is to get civilization to ascend to a higher consciousness, right? To eliminate our conflicts here on Earth between us and unite as a humanity
Hmm.
to, you know, uh, build the next phase of our civilization. I think that's like stuff that Elon Musk, speaks on a lot, right? Um,
Man, we could have an entire episode just discussing Elon Musk too, because what a fascinating,
right.
what a fascinating person. Like,
Absolutely. Right. So yeah, it's all about like, trying to ascend humanity into a new, higher, more enlightened phase. And I guess the point is, you can't really stop it because I think it's really tied to the universe, the planets, the stars, and the precession, right? Like we went from the age of what was it, Pisces to Aquarius, and that was the whole point. That was like the age of enlightening. So it's like it's forcing our hand. We don't have a choice. We have to wake up, and that's why it feels like such a rude awakening for some people because
yeah,
they're not ready for it. Many of us are, and we can
yeah.
handle it, and even help other people, like usher them through the next phase of the awakening, and the awareness. But yeah, many people are still stuck.
It's difficult,
And
and I try to have compassion. I think that's one thing that I'm really working on with
oh, yes,
for myself in particular, is to have more compassion for people because we're living in a difficult time, and I agree with you about this awakening and this raising of human consciousness. It's not an easy time for those who are very invested in the kind of social societal norms that have been ingrained in us right now, who wake up and are looking at their phone first thing in the morning and the last thing before going to bed, and they're more concerned with what they're going to watch on Netflix this evening than anything else in their life.
well, let's just take a side that those things are all okay, right?
They're
And
fine,
certainly
yeah.
we need to take a break,
It's enjoyable, yes, in
but yeah, as long as you're still on the path of enlightenment along the way, I'm
right,
saying.
because like like one thing that you mentioned having like as a potential talking point was ancient knowledge, right? And I find that super fascinating because
Yeah.
there's a lot of information coming out that challenges our notions of human history and what's written in the textbooks. I don't know if you've seen Graham Hancock has a new mini series on Netflix, speaking of Netflix, about certain archaeological sites that supposedly predate what historians think of as the start of humanity. So this is kind of like rocking the boat and changing a lot of things about the way we think we developed as societies and as humanity.
Absolutely. Yeah.
There's some of these things are incredibly complex in nature and had to have been made by advanced civilizations So there's a lot of questions. There's a lot of questions about where we came from.
Yeah, I think our history is very muddy. I think a lot of it is just a lot of it is I think a lot of it is like mythology that became fact over time. And I think a lot of maybe archaeological discoveries were I don't want to say planted, but like, maybe not discovered when they were discovered and reburied and for specific, purposes. But I mean, look, you could just take certain things, even our recent 20th century history, and compare it to the history books that, your kids get in school. And there's known inconsistencies that I'm sure you and I could find immediately in recent 20th century history.
Mhm.
Um, you know, and so that already raises the red flag that, hey, the history books are not accurate. What else isn't accurate, right?
Yeah.
um
And
and
that,
and yeah, like,
that it goes along with the saying that the history books are written by the victors as well.
yes,
It's we're getting a perspective, from somebody, but definitely not the whole story.
definitely not. Exactly.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know where else we can go with this and how much time you have, but I
Well,
feel
you know
like
what,
we need.
to stay on the ancient knowledge track, and yeah, we could spend a few more minutes and wrap it up. To stay on the ancient knowledge track, there's a really great series that you could probably look up on YouTube, called Secrets in Plain Sight. If you haven't seen that, and maybe you can leave a little link in the description, and maybe this
Yeah,
is, you can do some homework and watch it, and then maybe next time we could discuss.
for sure.
Um, but it's basically this guy who, it's like this 24-part series, but you could find it all sort of together in one like 4 hour long thing. But he basically jumps from like Washington DC to Paris to London to like all these different um, places in the world, Rome, the Vatican, and shows how um, this like ancient history, secret knowledge, um, general knowledge about the world, the size and weight of the planet, the circumference of Earth, the um, like ratios of the moon to Earth, and how it's so well aligned with like mathematics, and then how all of this knowledge is then encoded into the architecture of these cities, right? And it covers the Freemasons a lot because they're obviously involved in the architecture of many of these cities, especially DC because it was a planned city. But yeah, you'll be enthralled within the first 5 minutes, I'm sure.
Awesome. I've written it down. I'm going to check that out as soon as I can.
Nice, yeah. So yeah, all to say that there's definitely secret knowledge that I think gets passed down through different organizations, fraternal organizations like the Freemasons, and then just through like family and hereditary, and passing it down from father to son. And because I think there is, like, if you're talking about these really wealthy elite families, that they're all sort of interconnected, and have sort of the same goals and agenda, and pass this knowledge down to their children, right?
Yeah, it's fascinating. And there's so many stories. I mean, a lot of it goes into really, like, conspiracy theory territory, but
Sure.
with so many of those things, there's grains of truth sprinkled throughout, right? So that's the challenge, is being able to sift through the information. And this is why I give every theory consideration, regardless of how outrageous it seems, because everything has its little grains of truth in it. It's just the
Yeah.
challenge to identify what that is.
Absolutely. No, it's harder than ever. And another sort of thing, a takeaway from the family brunch this past week, is that you can't believe anything anymore. That's the hardest thing. Is like, that's what everyone was saying, is you can't believe. It's hard to believe anything.
Yeah, and maybe we don't need to, because I mean, if you listen to my previous episode, we had this whole discussion about intuition and how you feel when you receive a piece of information,
Sure.
right? That's I think that's something to be considered. I don't think it's the be all end all solver of all your problems, but listen to yourself. If you feel like something isn't right when you hear a piece of information, you know, maybe take that into consideration. I think there might be something to that.
Yeah, intuition paired with critical thinking,
Hmm.
and that's where you're most likely to find the truth.
I will
That's
say
for sure.
before we end it off that a lot of this talk about secret knowledge, I've spoken to a lot of spiritual people who are big into meditation and things like that for awakening your third eye and like connecting with your higher self and all of these things, which I buy into to some degree. And although I don't practice those things, very consistently myself, I still do find value in it. And I enjoy listening to those people speak about those things, especially people who are very passionate about it. It's like
Sure.
it's interesting to me. But the most powerful experience I've had and suggestion that there are other realms out there, other universes and much more to life than what meets the eye is uh psychedelic drugs. I mean, bar none. Like, take some mushrooms and just enjoy yourself for 3 hours and you will come out of that a different person. It is it's like a transformative experience. And I think everybody should try it at least once
Yeah.
in their lifetime.
Yeah, I did mushrooms once, well, twice. The first time was I was up at a friend's cottage, and so the environment was really ideal. It was like must have been I don't know, late summer day, um, and it was just a bunch of us, like close friends, and we had like a cabin forest, and we took the mushrooms, and yeah, same thing. Had a very transformative experience. Things happen that you just yeah, you feel like there is more to this than what we see with our own eyes here.
Absolutely.
Um, and yeah, the second time I took it, uh, I was not in the best place, and it wasn't the best experience, but it ended okay, so it was fine.
Yeah, so much of that is about the state of mind that you're in at the time and your surroundings and the people that you're with, if anyone.
Absolutely.
But you kind of I feel that you take out of that experience what you put into it. It's like the energy that you bring to it. A lot of the time,
Yeah.
that's what you'll experience. So, anyways, for those who are curious, I mean, find somebody who knows about it that can help you get
Yeah.
something that's get the most out of the experience. But
Yeah.
yeah, it's one of those things that is, I find it hard to believe that there's such a stigma against those. And I've watched documentaries about that too, about how there were campaigns to discredit studies and defund studies done on, like, psilocybin and LSD and things that could have been helping to treat terminally ill patients, treat
Hmm.
cancers and stuff like that. And these things
Yeah.
were shut down in the 80s and 90s. And to me, that's a crime. Like, these substances should have, it's medicine and it's from plants, it's natural. They should have been studied in depth, and it should be accessible to anybody and encouraged as therapeutics. Anyways, I could go on and on about this, but maybe that's for another day, another conversation.
Might upset the pharmaceutical companies.
I'm not too worried.
Okay.
Maybe
Good.
maybe
Yeah.
when a few more people are watching this, I'll I'll feel a little bit more vulnerable, but I think I'm okay right now.
We'll get you security.
Yeah.
Uh, Great. All right. Well, if you want to call it, I'd say that's good.
For sure. Yeah. No, this was a great conversation. We touched on a lot of things, which was kind of what I was hoping, but let's do it again. We can get in depth on some of these things, perhaps. Uh,
Anytime.
yeah, it was great speaking to you. Always fascinating. And I feel like I know you a little bit better now, Dave.
Yeah, we do. We know each other a little bit better. I've been meaning to ask you to go grab a beer sometime, which the invitation is always there.
Totally down.
Just DM me. We'll set it up.
Let's do that.
But, yeah, uh, that way we could maybe discuss some things that won't get your YouTube channel canceled.
I think that's my ultimate goal, is to get my YouTube channel pulled from the platform. I think that's that's when I know that I've done something correctly, is when they try to take it down.
Well, that's how you know that's when the fun really begins.
There you go. Anyways, what a journey. What a journey we're all on.
Yeah,
One day at a time.
one foot in front of the other.
Exactly. Well, thank you, Dave. Enjoy the rest of your day.
I will. You too. Have a good one.